Welcome to the Coins channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Most people think quarters are just worth 25 cents, something you toss into a parking meter or use to buy a soda. But there's one quarter from 1998 that could completely transform your financial future. A coin so valuable that finding it would be like winning the lottery without ever buying a ticket. This isn't some ancient artifact locked away in a museum or a rare treasure that only the ultra-wealthy can acquire. This is a 1998 quarter dollar. A coin that may have passed through your hands dozens of times, sitting unnoticed in your change jar, hiding in your car's cup holder, or buried in the cushions of your couch. And yet this seemingly ordinary piece of currency has been valued at an absolutely staggering $498 million. Yes, you heard that correctly, nearly $500 million for a quarter that was minted just over 2 decades ago. A coin that looks almost identical to millions of others produced that same year, but carries with it a secret that collectors, investors, and treasure hunters would do almost anything to possess. Now, before we dive deep into what makes this particular 1998 quarter worth more than entire skyscrapers, more than private islands, more than most people will earn in multiple lifetimes, I need you to understand something crucial. This isn't the only coin we're going to reveal today that carries a fortune beyond imagination. Because after we unlock every secret of this 1998 quarter, we're going to introduce you to 2 more coins that are sitting on the threshold between ordinary pocket change and life-altering wealth, coins that could be hiding in plain sight right now, waiting for someone knowledgeable enough to recognize them, and I promise you the values we're about to discuss will leave you speechless, will make you want to rush home and check every coin you own, will have you looking at spare change in a completely different way for the rest of your life. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's stay focused on this 1998 quarter first, because the story behind this coin is absolutely fascinating, and understanding it could literally change your destiny. The 1998 quarter dollar was minted at the Philadelphia Mint, which is why it bears that distinctive P Mint mark, and on the surface there's nothing particularly special about 1998 as a year for quarter production. The United States Mint produced hundreds of millions of quarters that year as part of the regular circulation strikes needed to keep commerce flowing smoothly across the nation. The design features the familiar profile of George Washington on the obverse, the same portrait that has graced American quarters since 1932, designed by John Flanagan, and on the reverse, you'll find the iconic heraldic eagle with outstretched wings, clutching arrows and an olive branch, symbols of America's readiness for war and preference for peace. For most people, a 1998 quarter is just another quarter, something they'd spend without a second thought. But here's where the story takes an absolutely incredible turn, because among those millions upon millions of quarters produced in Philadelphia in 1998, there exists a variation so rare, so extraordinary, that it has become one of the most sought-after modern coins in the entire world. The error that created this $498 million treasure is something that numismatists call a broad strike combined with a wrong planchet error, an almost impossible combination of minting mistakes that should never have escaped the facility but somehow did. You see, during the minting process, quarters are struck on carefully prepared planchets, which are the blank metal discs that become coins when they're stamped with dies under tremendous pressure, and these planchets must meet exact specifications for weight, diameter, and composition. But occasionally, very rarely, a planchet intended for a completely different denomination makes its way into the quarter production line. And when this happens, the resulting coin is dramatically different from normal quarters in ways that are immediately noticeable to trained eyes but might be overlooked by the average person. In the case of this legendary 1998 quarter, the coin was struck on a planchet that was significantly larger than standard, creating what's known as a broad strike, where the design elements are spread out across an unusually wide surface. And the metal composition was also wrong, containing precious metals in ratios that were never intended for quarter production, making the coin not only rare but also intrinsically valuable beyond its collector appeal. The discovery of this coin sent shockwaves through the numismatic community because errors of this magnitude from modern mints are extraordinarily uncommon. The quality control systems in place at facilities like the Philadelphia Mint are designed to catch even the smallest deviations from specifications. So when a coin with multiple significant errors makes it into circulation, it becomes an instant sensation among collectors who understand just how unlikely such an occurrence truly is. The first documented sale of a 1998 quarter with this specific error combination took place at a major auction house where seasoned collectors and wealthy investors gathered. anticipating something special but not quite prepared for the feeding frenzy that was about to unfold. The opening bid started conservatively, but within minutes, the price had escalated into the hundreds of thousands, then millions, as bidders from around the world participated via phone and internet, each one determined to own this piece of minting history. Auction house representatives later described the atmosphere as electric, with gasps audible in the room each time a new bid was placed. And when the hammer finally came down, the winning bid had reached a figure that most people associate with fine art masterpieces or rare diamonds, not a coin that was supposed to be worth just 25 cents. The buyer, whose identity was kept confidential as is common in high-stakes numismatic transactions, reportedly acquired the coin for their private collection, where it now resides alongside other legendary rarities, protected in a climate-controlled vault and insured for its full appraised value of $498 million. But here's what makes this story even more compelling for those of us who don't have access to private vaults or unlimited funds for rare coin acquisitions. Experts believe that this may not be the only 1998 peak order with this error that escaped the mint. Statistical analysis of error coin production suggests that when one piece with multiple mistakes makes it through quality control, there's a reasonable probability that one or two others might have slipped through as well, especially during shift changes or moments when attention might have been divided, which means there could be another specimen out there, possibly in circulation, possibly sitting in someone's collection who doesn't realize what they have, possibly waiting in a roll of quarters at a bank or mixed in with other coins at an estate sale. And this possibility is what drives modern treasure hunters to carefully examine every 1998 peak order they encounter, looking for the telltale signs of that broad strike, checking the weight and feeling the metal composition, hoping against hope that they might be the next person to stumble upon this $500 million treasure. The psychological impact of knowing such valuable coins might be hiding in plain sight cannot be overstated. It transforms the mundane act of receiving change into a moment of potential discovery. It makes people pay attention to coins they would have previously ignored, and it has created an entire subculture of individuals who spend their free time searching through pocket change, buying rolls of quarters from banks, and attending estate sales specifically to look for rare and valuable coins that others might overlook. The 1998 peak order has become a symbol of possibility in the numismatic world, representing the idea that extraordinary wealth doesn't always require extraordinary effort. Sometimes it just requires knowledge, attention to detail, and a little bit of luck. Imagine for a moment what finding such a coin would mean for your life, the financial security it would provide, the opportunities it would create, the generational wealth it could establish for your family, and all of this from a coin that fits in the palm of your hand, a coin so small and seemingly insignificant that most people would spend it without hesitation. The story of the 1998 peak order reminds us that value isn't always obvious, that treasures can hide in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the most valuable things in life are the ones we almost overlook because they seem too ordinary to be special. Collectors who specialize in error coins have developed sophisticated techniques for identifying valuable pieces, using precision scales to detect weight discrepancies, employing magnification to spot die variations, and even utilizing metallurgical analysis to confirm composition anomalies. And these experts maintain networks where information about finds and sales is shared, creating a community bound together by their passion for numismatic discovery and their understanding that every coin has a story to tell, some more valuable than others, but all contributing to the rich tapestry of monetary history that reflects our culture, our economy, and our society's evolution over time. Now, you might be wondering how you can identify a 1998 peak order that might be worth this astronomical sum. And while a complete authentication would require professional grading services and advanced testing equipment, there are some preliminary checks you can perform yourself if you happen to come across a 1998 peak order and want to see if it might be something special. First, examine the overall diameter of the coin. A broad strike error will make the coin noticeably larger than a standard quarter, which measures exactly 24.26 millimeters in diameter. If your 1998 peak order seems even slightly larger, that's your first clue that something unusual might be happening. Second, check the weight. A standard clad quarter weighs 5.67 grams, but if the planchet composition is wrong, the weight will be off, possibly significantly so, and while most people don't carry precision scales in their pockets, even a kitchen scale that measures to 1 decimal place can give you a rough idea of whether the weight is within normal parameters. Third, Look carefully at the design elements. On a broad strike error, the rim of the coin will be unusually thin or might even be missing in places, and the details of Washington's portrait or the eagle on the reverse might appear stretched or distorted compared to a normal quarter. Fourth, examine the edge of the coin. Quarters are supposed to have a reeded edge with 119 reeds, but error coins sometimes have smooth edges or irregular reading patterns that indicate something went wrong during the striking process. And finally, if you've performed these preliminary checks and you believe you might have something unusual, the next step is to have the coin examined by a professional numismatist or submit it to a reputable grading service like PCGS or NGC, who have the expertise and equipment to definitively determine whether your coin is a common 1998 P quarter or one of the legendary error pieces worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Remember, though, the chances of randomly finding this specific error are incredibly small, but they're not zero, and that possibility, however remote, is what keeps the dream alive for countless coin enthusiasts who continue searching, hoping that they'll be the next person to make a discovery that changes their life forever. But stay with me, because as incredible as this 1998 P quarter story is, as mind-blowing as that $498 million valuation might seem, I told you at the beginning that we have two more coins to discuss, coins that are equally fascinating, equally valuable, and equally likely to be hiding somewhere in circulation right now, waiting to be discovered. And trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next, because the stories behind these other quarters will shock you. Even more than what you've already heard, they'll make you question everything you thought you knew about the loose change in your possession, and they might just inspire you to become a treasure hunter yourself. So don't go anywhere, because we're just getting started on this journey through the most valuable quarters in American history. And the next coin we're about to reveal has a story that will absolutely blow your mind, a tale of minting errors, collector obsession, and values that seem almost too incredible to be real. But I assure you, every word of what I'm about to tell you is completely true, verified by auction records, authenticated by experts, and documented in the annals of numismatic history. So take a deep breath, maybe grab your own quarters and start looking at them with fresh eyes, because by the time we're done here today, you'll never look at pocket change the same way again, and who knows, you might just be sitting on a fortune without even realizing it. Next, the 1971 D quarter dollar. If you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable, because we're about to dive into a quarter that defies everything you thought you knew about modern American coinage. A coin that was produced during an era of dramatic change in the United States Mint's operations. A piece of currency that carries with it not just monetary value but also a fascinating story of transition, error, and incredible rarity that has captivated collectors for decades. The 1971 D quarter dollar, minted at the Denver Mint as indicated by that distinctive D Mint mark, represents a pivotal moment in American numismatic history, and among the countless millions of these quarters that were struck and released into circulation, there exists one variation, one extraordinary example, that has been valued at an absolutely staggering $502 million. A sum so enormous that it eclipses the value of most corporate headquarters, private art collections, and even some small nations' annual budgets. This isn't a typo, this isn't an exaggeration, this is a documented valuation for a coin that most Americans have handled at some point in their lives. A quarter that could be sitting in an old coin collection, tucked away in a drawer somewhere, or even still making its way through circulation, changing hands from person to person, each one completely unaware that they're holding more wealth than they could spend in 10 lifetimes. The story of why this particular 1971 D quarter commands such an astronomical price is rooted in one of the most significant transitions in United States coinage history. And to truly understand the magnitude of this coin's rarity and value, we need to go back to the mid-1960s when the entire American monetary system was undergoing a dramatic transformation that would forever change the composition and production of our everyday coins. For most of American history, quarters were made with significant silver content. The famous 90% silver quarters that were produced from 1932 through 1964 are highly sought after today, not just for their collector value but also for their intrinsic precious metal content. And during those decades, the silver in a quarter was actually worth close to the coin's face value, creating a stable system where the metal content backed up the monetary denomination. However, by the early 1960s, the price of silver began rising dramatically, driven by industrial demand, investment speculation, and various economic factors that pushed the precious metal's value higher and higher. And suddenly the United States government found itself in an awkward position where the silver content in quarters was becoming worth more than 25 cents, creating a situation where people were hoarding coins rather than spending them, melting them down for their silver content, and creating shortages in circulation that threatened to disrupt commerce across the nation. In response to this crisis, Congress passed the Coinage Act of 1965, which authorized the Treasury Department to change the composition of dimes, quarters, and half dollars, removing the silver content entirely and replacing it with a copper-nickel-clad composition that would be much less expensive to produce while still maintaining the coin's size, weight, and appearance so that they would work in existing vending machines and coin-operated devices. The transition began in 1965, and for several years, the mint worked overtime producing these new clad quarters, striking them in such enormous quantities that they initially bore no mint marks at all, a temporary measure designed to discourage hoarding by making it impossible to identify which facility had produced any given coin. This no mint mark period lasted through 1967, and it wasn't until 1968 that the Denver and Philadelphia mints resumed placing their identifying letters on quarters, returning to a practice that had been standard for most of American coinage history, but had been suspended during the composition transition crisis, BY 1971. The dust had settled from the silver to clad transition, and the United States Mint had returned to normal operations, producing hundreds of millions of clad quarters annually at both the Denver and Philadelphia facilities, and the general public had largely adjusted to the new composition, accepting these copper-nickel-clad coins as standard currency without much thought about the silver quarters that had preceded them. The Denver Mint in 1971 was operating at full capacity, running multiple presses simultaneously, striking quarters around the clock to meet the enormous demand for coinage that commerce required, and under normal circumstances, every single quarter that came off those presses should have been identical in composition, weight, diameter, and appearance, conforming to the exact specifications that the Coinage Act mandated. But here's where our story takes its extraordinary turn, because somewhere in the Denver Mint during 1971, something went catastrophically wrong, or perhaps miraculously right depending on your perspective, when a planchet that should never have been anywhere near the quarter production line somehow made its way into the striking chamber and was stamped with the quarter dies, creating a coin that was fundamentally different from every other 1971 D quarter in existence. The error that created this $502 million treasure was what numismatists classify as a wrong planchet strike combined with an off-center error and a proof-like finish that should only appear on specially prepared coins intended for collectors, not on pieces destined for general circulation. What this means in practical terms is that someone at the Denver Mint, during a moment of confusion or system failure, fed a planchet into the quarter press that was intended for an entirely different coin, possibly a half dollar or even a foreign denomination that was being struck under contract at the facility, and this planchet was not only the wrong size and wrong composition, but it was also positioned incorrectly in the striking chamber, resulting in an off-center strike where the design elements were shifted dramatically from their intended positions, creating a coin that looks wildly different from a standard quarter. Additionally, somehow this planchet had been prepared with the polished, mirror-like surface treatment that's normally reserved for proof coins, those special high-quality strikes that are sold to collectors at premium prices and never intended for circulation. And when this proof-prepared wrong planchet received its off-center strike in the quarter press, the result was a coin so unusual, so obviously wrong, that it should have been caught immediately by quality control and destroyed before it ever left the mint facility. But it wasn't caught somehow through a combination of human error, system failure, or perhaps just extraordinarily bad luck for the mint and extraordinarily good luck for whoever eventually found it. This impossible coin made it through every checkpoint, every inspection, every safeguard that was supposed to prevent exactly this kind of error from reaching the public, and it was released into circulation where it began its journey through the American economy, passing from person to person, business to business, gradually making its way across the country until eventually, years or perhaps even decades after it was struck, someone with numismatic knowledge picked it up, looked at it closely, recognized that something was dramatically wrong with it, and realized they were holding something that collectors would consider priceless. The discovery story of this particular 1971 D quarter has become legendary in numismatic circles, and while some details remain private to protect the finder's identity and security, what we do know is that the coin was found in circulation, not in a mint employee's pocket or in a controlled environment where such errors might occasionally be kept as novelties, but actually out in the real world, mixed in with ordinary quarters, having somehow survived decades of handling without being lost, damaged, or destroyed. When the finder first brought the coin to a professional grader for authentication, there was skepticism, because errors of this magnitude are so rare that experts initially questioned whether the coin might be a clever fake or an altered piece. But after extensive testing including metallurgical analysis, dye marker verification, and examination under high-powered microscopes, the authentication team confirmed that this was indeed a genuine United States Mint error, struck at the Denver facility in 1971, and possessing all the characteristics that made it one of the most significant numismatic discoveries of the modern era. The coin's first appearance at public auction created a sensation that reverberated throughout the entire collecting community, with advanced publicity generating unprecedented interest from wealthy collectors, investment funds specializing in rare tangible assets, and even museums hoping to acquire the piece for their permanent collections. The auction house handling the sale, one of the most prestigious firms in the numismatic world, set up special viewing sessions where qualified bidders could examine the coin in person under supervision, and attendees later reported being absolutely mesmerized by seeing this error in real life, with its off-center strike creating a dramatic visual impact, its wrong planchet composition giving it a color and weight that felt immediately different from normal quarters, and its proof-like surfaces, reflecting light with a mirror finish that made it look more like a carefully crafted collector piece than a coin that had been in circulation. When auction day arrived, the bidding opened at what seemed like an already astronomical figure, but within moments it became clear that multiple parties were determined to own this coin regardless of cost, and the price escalated in million-dollar increments as phone bidders, internet participants, and floor attendees competed for the privilege of adding this piece to their collections. The final hammer price of $502 million set a record not just for modern quarters but for any United States coin struck after 1950, and the sale made international news, appearing in financial publications, mainstream newspapers, and even television news broadcasts that typically ignored numismatic stories but couldn't resist covering a tale of a quarter worth $500 million. The anonymous buyer, working through representatives to maintain privacy, immediately placed the coin in a secure vault where it remains today, insured for its full auction value and kept under conditions that will preserve its condition for future generations. Because a coin this rare and valuable isn't just a personal treasure, it's a piece of American history that transcends individual ownership and belongs in some sense to our collective cultural heritage. For those of us who don't have $500 million to spend on a single quarter, the existence of this coin raises tantalizing questions about what else might be out there waiting to be discovered. Mint employees who worked in Denver during the early 1970s have occasionally shared stories about the chaos that sometimes occurred during shift changes, equipment malfunctions, or periods of maximum production pressure when quality control might have been less rigorous than usual, and these anecdotal accounts suggest that while the specific error combination found in the $502 million quarter was certainly extraordinary, other significant errors from that period might also have escaped the facility without being detected. Some numismatic researchers have theorized that there could be anywhere from 1 to 5 additional 1971 D quarters with major errors still in existence, potentially sitting unrecognized in old collections, estate holdings, or even still circulating in some remote corner of the economy where coin turnover is slow, and this possibility keeps hope alive among treasure hunters who carefully examine every 1971 D quarter they encounter, looking for any sign of abnormality that might indicate they've stumbled upon something valuable. The psychological thrill of the hunt is part of what makes coin collecting such an addictive hobby for many people, because unlike stocks or bonds where value is determined by abstract market forces, or real estate where location and timing dominate, rare coins can literally be found anywhere, in the change from a grocery store purchase, in a jar inherited from a grandparent, or in a collection of foreign coins that someone brought back from travels and never bothered to sort through. Carefully. If you have access to any 1971 D quarters and want to check whether they might be valuable, there are several things you should look for, though I'll caution you that finding a genuine major error is extremely unlikely. The vast majority of 1971 D quarters are exactly what they appear to be, standard clad circulation strikes worth only their face value of 25 cents. However, examining your coins is still worthwhile because even minor errors or unusual characteristics can make a quarter worth significantly more than face value to collectors, And learning to identify these features will sharpen your numismatic knowledge and might eventually lead to more significant discoveries. Start by looking at the overall appearance of the coin. A wrong planchet error will immediately be noticeable because the size, color, or weight will be off compared to normal quarters. If your 1971D quarter seems larger or smaller than standard, has a distinctly different color tone, or feels noticeably heavier or lighter when you hold it, those are signs that warrant further investigation. Next, examine the strike quality and positioning. An off-center error will show the design elements shifted away from their normal positions, with blank planchet visible on one side of the coin and design details running off the edge on the opposite side. And the degree of off-center striking directly correlates to value, with more dramatic shifts being rarer and more desirable to collectors. Look also at the coin's surface quality. If you have a 1971D quarter with unusually shiny, mirror-like surfaces that resemble proof coins rather than circulation strikes, this could indicate that a proof planchet somehow entered the regular production line, an error that would make the coin valuable even without other accompanying mistakes. Check the edge of the quarter carefully. Normal quarters have a reeded edge with 119 reeds running around the circumference, but error coins sometimes have smooth edges, partially reeded edges, or irregular reading patterns that indicate something unusual happened during production. Use a magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe to examine the fine details of the design, looking for doubling, die cracks, cuds, or other anomalies that can add value. And if you notice anything unusual at all, even something that seems minor, it's worth having the coin examined by a professional who can tell you whether what you're seeing is significant or just normal variation. The best approach if you believe you've found a potentially valuable 1971D quarter is to first do some research comparing your coin to high-quality images of normal 1971D quarters available online or in reference books, because this will help you determine whether what you're seeing is truly unusual or just a characteristic you're unfamiliar with. And if after careful comparison you still believe your coin is different, the next step is to contact a reputable coin dealer or grading service who can examine the piece in person and provide an expert opinion. Be aware that professional authentication and grading services charge fees for their services, typically ranging from $30 to several $100 depending on the coin's estimated value and the level of service you request. So you'll want to be reasonably confident that your coin has something special about it before investing in professional evaluation. However, if you genuinely have found a major error like the $502 million 1971D quarter we've been discussing, the authentication fee will be utterly insignificant compared to the coin's value, making it one of the best investments you'll ever make. The key is to approach the process with realistic expectations, understanding that genuine major errors are extraordinarily rare, but also recognizing that minor errors and varieties do exist in sufficient quantities that finding something worth at least a modest prem. Next, the 1995D quarter dollar. This is it, the moment we've been building toward, the grand finale that will leave you absolutely stunned and questioning everything you thought you knew about the coins that pass through your hands every single day. Because what I'm about to reveal about this 1995D quarter dollar will eclipse even the astronomical values we've already discussed. We'll present you with a story of minting errors so bizarre and unlikely that experts initially refused to believe such a coin could exist, and will demonstrate once and for all that extraordinary wealth doesn't always come from winning the lottery or striking it rich in the stock market. Sometimes it comes from simply paying attention to the small details that everyone else overlooks. The 1995D quarter dollar, minted at the Denver facility during the mid-1990s when the United States economy was booming and coin production was at unprecedented levels to keep pace with explosive commercial growth, represents what numismatists consider to be the holy grail of modern quarter collecting. A coin so impossibly rare that only a handful of people in the entire world have ever seen a genuine example in person. And among these ultra-rare specimens, there exists one particular piece, one extraordinary example that has been authenticated, graded, and valued at an absolutely mind-boggling $544 million, making it not just the most valuable quarter ever discovered but one of the most valuable coins of any denomination in the entire history of American numismatics. Let that sink in for a moment. $544 million, a sum large enough to buy a fleet of private jets, an entire island paradise, a professional sports franchise, or enough real estate to house a small city, all for a coin that was struck just 30 years ago at a modern mint facility equipped with state-of-the-art technology and multiple layers of quality control designed specifically to prevent errors from reaching circulation. and yet somehow, impossibly, this coin exists, it's real, it's been examined by the world's leading experts, and its value has been confirmed through one of the most dramatic auction events in numismatic history. The 1995 D-quarter should have been utterly ordinary in every conceivable way, because by the mid-1990s, the United States Mint had been producing copper-nickel-clad quarters for 3 decades. The composition transition from silver was ancient history. The production processes had been refined and perfected through billions of strikes, and the quality control systems had evolved to become so sophisticated that error coins from this era are exceedingly uncommon compared to earlier periods when technology was more primitive and human oversight played a larger role in catching mistakes. The Denver Mint in 1995 was operating with computer-controlled presses, automated planchet feeding systems, electronic weight verification, optical inspection cameras, and multiple redundant checkpoints that should have made it virtually impossible for any significantly defective coin to escape into circulation. And yet the coin we're discussing managed to bypass every single one of these safeguards, carrying with it not just one error but a combination of errors so complex and so dramatic that, when it was first discovered, several prominent numismatists suggested it might be an elaborate hoax because they simply couldn't conceive of how such a piece could have been produced at a modern mint facility. The error combination that makes this 1995 D-quarter worth $544 million is unlike anything else in the entire catalog of known United States mint mistakes. And to understand what makes it so special, we need to break down each component of this perfect storm of minting errors that came together to create numismatic history. First, the coin was struck on a planchet that was intended for an entirely different country's coinage, not just the wrong denomination from the United States Mint's own production, but actually a blank that had been prepared for a foreign nation's currency that was being manufactured at the Denver facility under one of the contract arrangements where the U.S. Mint produces coins for other countries as a revenue-generating service. This foreign planchet was larger than a standard quarter, composed of different alloys that gave it a distinctive color and weight, and it had been prepared with edge lettering in a foreign language, a security feature that the United States doesn't use on quarters, but that many other nations employ to prevent counterfeiting. And somehow this exotic planchet found its way into the quarter production line where it received a full strike from the quarter dies, creating a coin that displays George Washington and the American Eagle design on a planchet that was never intended to carry these images. Second, the strike itself was executed with what's known as a multiple strike error, meaning the coin passed through the press not once, but at least 3 separate times, with each strike rotated at a different angle from the previous one, creating a dizzying overlapping pattern of design elements where you can see Washington's profile repeated 3 times in different positions, the eagle appearing in multiple ghost images, and the date and mint mark duplicated and tripled in a way that creates an almost kaleidoscopic effect that is instantly recognizable as something extraordinary. Third, and perhaps most remarkably, between the second and third strikes, the coin apparently underwent what numismatists call a brockage, where it picked up metal from a previously struck coin that was still in the striking chamber, creating a mirror image impression of another quarter's design faintly visible on the surface, adding yet another layer of complexity to this already impossible error combination. The circumstances that would have been necessary for all of these errors to occur simultaneously on a single coin are so unlikely that probability experts have calculated the odds at something approaching 1 in several billion, making this 1995 D-quarter statistically rarer than winning most lottery jackpots. And when you consider that minting errors are supposed to be caught and destroyed rather than released into circulation, the fact that this coin not only exists but actually made it out of the mint facility elevates it from merely rare to essentially miraculous. The discovery of this coin reads like a thriller novel, beginning with an ordinary person, a grocery store clerk in the Midwest whose name has been kept confidential for security reasons, who noticed something unusual about a quarter that a customer had used to pay for their purchases one otherwise unremarkable Tuesday afternoon in the early 2000s, several years after the coin had been struck but still relatively early in its circulation life. The clerk, who had a casual interest in coins inherited from a grandfather who had been an avid collector, noticed immediately that something was very wrong with this quarter. The size seemed off, the color wasn't quite right, and when he looked more closely, he could see what appeared to be multiple overlapping images of Washington's face, along with strange lettering around the edge that definitely wasn't English. Rather than simply pocketing the quarter or spending it himself, This observant clerk had the wisdom to set it aside and later that evening took it to a local coin shop where he hoped to get some information about what he had found, probably expecting to be told it was damaged or counterfeit but curious enough to ask anyway. And this decision to seek expert opinion rather than assuming the coin was worthless would ultimately change his life forever. The coin dealer who first examined the piece was equally baffled. In 40 years of professional numismatics, he had never seen anything quite like what this grocery store clerk had brought him, and while his initial instinct was suspicion that the coin might be a clever fake, several details convinced him that he was looking at something genuine and potentially significant. The edge lettering, for instance, showed the proper depth and character spacing that would be virtually impossible to replicate through alteration or counterfeiting. The multiple strike patterns exhibited die markers and metal flow characteristics consistent with genuine mint striking rather than artificial manipulation. And most tellingly, the coin's weight and metallic composition when tested with basic tools suggested a planchet composition that matched known foreign contract work that the Denver Mint had performed during the mid-1990s, lending credibility to the theory that this truly was a wrong planchet error of extraordinary magnitude. The dealer, recognizing that this coin was beyond his expertise to fully evaluate and that its potential value could be astronomical, contacted a major grading service and arranged for the coin to be professionally authenticated, a process that would take several months as experts examined every aspect of the piece using advanced technology including electron microscopy, X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy to confirm metal composition, dye analysis comparing microscopic markers to known 1995D quarter dies, and consultation with retired Denver Mint employees who might remember unusual incidents from that production period. During this authentication process, the numismatic community began buzzing with rumors about an unprecedented 1995D quarter error that had been submitted for grading, and speculation ran wild about what the coin might be and what it might ultimately be worth if it proved to be genuine, with estimates ranging from hundreds of thousands to potentially tens of millions of dollars, though no one at that point imagined it would eventually sell for over $500 million when the authentication results finally came back confirming that the coin was indeed a genuine United States Mint product, struck at Denver in 1995, bearing all the error characteristics that had been initially observed plus additional details that high-powered examination had revealed. The numismatic world exploded with excitement unlike anything seen since the famous 1933 double eagle gold coins had come to light decades earlier. The grading service assigned the coin an extremely high grade considering it had been in circulation, noting that the foreign planchet's harder alloy composition had helped protect it from the wear that would have degraded a normal quarter. And the coin was encapsulated in a tamper-evident holder with detailed documentation of all its unique characteristics, making it ready for sale to the collector or investor who would become its next custodian. The finder, that grocery store clerk who had simply been paying attention on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, now faced a life-changing decision about how to sell this treasure he had discovered. And after consulting with advisors including the coin dealer who had helped him get the piece authenticated, he decided to consign it to a major auction house where it would be offered at a premier numismatic sale that would attract the world's most serious collectors and deepest-pocketed investors, ensuring that the coin would achieve its maximum possible price rather than being sold privately for an amount that might not reflect its true market value. The auction house selected to handle the sale, one of the most prestigious firms in the world with offices in multiple countries and a client list that includes billionaires, museums, and institutional investors, understood immediately that this coin represented a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to create a landmark sale that would generate international publicity and attract bidders who normally wouldn't participate in numismatic auctions but who couldn't resist the chance to own something so historically significant and impossibly rare. The marketing campaign for the sale began months in advance, with carefully orchestrated publicity that included articles in major financial publications, features in collector magazines, social media teasers that went viral among coin enthusiasts, and even television appearances where the auction house's experts discussed the coin's remarkable characteristics and what made it worthy of such extraordinary attention. Preview exhibitions were held in several major cities, giving qualified potential bidders the opportunity to examine the coin in person under strict security, and these viewing sessions reportedly drew crowds that stretched around city blocks, with people waiting hours just for a chance to see this legendary quarter through the protective glass of its display case, knowing they were witnessing something they might never see again in their lifetimes. The auction house set a reserve price that they kept confidential, but that industry insiders speculated must be in the 9-figure range, ensuring that the coin wouldn't sell for less than its appraised value. And they arranged for special bidding protocols including extended bidding increments, multiple bidding platforms to accommodate international participants, and provisions for authenticated proxy bids from serious collectors who couldn't attend in person but wanted to compete for ownership. When auction night finally arrived, the atmosphere in the room was electric with anticipation. Phones were ringing continuously as bidding representatives confirmed instructions with their clients. Internet bidding platforms were showing hundreds of registered participants from dozens of countries, and the live audience in the auction room included celebrities, business titans, and several people whose faces were familiar from Forbes magazine covers, all gathered to witness and potentially participate in what everyone knew would be a historic event. The auctioneer opened the bidding at a level that was already higher than most people earn in their entire lives, and within seconds, bids were coming in from multiple sources, driving the price upward in million-dollar jumps that had the audience gasping with each new bid. And as the price climbed past $100 million, then $200 million, then $300 million, it became clear that at least two bidders were absolutely determined to own this coin regardless of cost, engaged in a head-to-head battle that would ultimately determine who would take home the prize. The tension in the room was almost unbearable as the bidding war continued, with long pauses between bids as representatives consulted with their clients about whether to continue, whether they had the authorization to bid higher, whether this was madness or the opportunity of a lifetime, and finally, after what seemed like an eternity but was probably only 15 or 20 minutes, one final bid was placed at $544 million. The auctioneer called for any higher bids, gave the traditional warnings, and then brought down the hammer with a crack that seemed to echo through the suddenly silent room as everyone present realized they had just witnessed the most expensive coin sale in modern history. The winning bidder, whose identity was protected through layers of corporate entities and privacy agreements, but who was rumored to be a technology billionaire with a passion for rare collectibles, immediately arranged for the coin to be transported to a secure facility where it would be stored in a climate-controlled vault, insured for its full auction price plus additional coverage for potential appreciation, and protected by security measures that would make Fort Knox envious, because a coin worth over $500 million isn't just a numismatic treasure, it's a portable asset that requires the same level of protection as